So here we are again. I have time and the desire to share some thoughts, and I guess we're moving right along. The topic I've been trying to think about a little bit is the final judgment. So I wanted to share some thoughts on that. Uh, you know, I'm not sure that I have anything incredible to say. I know that's not good publicity for me, but honesty, I suppose, is, or humility, which St. Teresa says is the truth, might be a good thing. Um, and the issue of conscience and the issue of where this judgment actually takes place, um, or what precedes it, or what is analogous to the final judgment, which is the judgment we make of ourselves. I just recorded one of the great Ken Burns series on various families or people, and this one is on Hemingway. And one of the speakers in the series was saying that as one approaches a certain age, one begins to think a lot about his life. I know David Brooks, the columnist, talks about things that are not for your resume, but as you want to be remembered. And the fact of the matter is that most of us have a conscience. Uh, I think there are some pathological, cases, psychopaths and such, who have an extremely undeveloped or perhaps even inexistent conscience. Others have the other extreme, scrupulosity, which is a phenomenon that appears in the spiritual path. Ignatius of Loyola, I think, was tempted to suicide in the Manresa period in near Barcelona because of scrupulosity. And Thérèse of Lisieux suffered from scrupulosity, meaning you want to be so perfect in pleasing God and avoiding even the most minute violation of the commandments or counsels or whatever other requirements for pleasing God there are, that you see sin where none has been committed. And I myself, believe it or not, after my conversion at the age of 19, my first, big conversion, maybe fundamental conversion at the age of 19, I was attending University of Miami, and I would go to St. Augustine's Church and ask for confession, so frequently during the week that the priest basically, he said to me, "Stop it, you're being scrupulous or whatever." So that humans have this built-in judger that we call the conscience. Conscience is like, some sort of self-knowledge or knowledge with. The same thing as in Greek, the word syneidesis is the word often translated conscience. It's found in the book of wisdom. I remember reading that when I read through the whole New Jerome biblical commentary. So in this tremendous chapter of Wisdom 17, which is a type of parable of the plagues in Egypt, etc., talks about the whole land being in darkness except for the Israelites, etc. And it has a tremendous line here. I'm going to read it from my Spanish translation. This is a Greek book, the Book of Wisdom, probably the latest in the Catholic Old Testament canon. And it says here, Cowardly, in effect, is wickedness, and she condemns herself. Uh, Attacked by conscience or cornered by conscience, Sinedes is this word here that I said. It always imagines the worst. Because fear is nothing other than the aid which reflection confers or provides. It's the abandonment of that. When you sort of lose your reason or your capacity to reflect, the aid that that reasoning gives you, when it is you are bereft of that, when you don't have that anymore, fear comes. I'm reading the Stoics, as I said, Seneca, and there's a lot of similar things. So that, anthropologically, they would say that in the process of socialization, etc., you are inculcated with tribal values or whatever, and there are very primitive things, like incest taboos and other types of taboos, and you could extend that to many other cases. But nevertheless, we internalize, and I think we're sort of wired and predisposed toward judging our actions. But again, environment and nurturing has a huge role to play. I had God fearing parents. My father, not a great, armband, neither of them great armband Catholics, but God-fearers and humble. My mother, much more visible in her prayer, and her upbringing with, Salesian Don Bosco influence, etc. She hated haughtiness, soberbia in Spanish, superbia, in Latin, hubris in Greek. And my father was a humble, God-fearing and fair man. Fair to all his children. He may not have been always a loving, serene father. He was a very nervous man, very irritable, and even, if I said wrathful, it sounds like Old Testament stuff, but yeah, we were not hit almost ever. My mother hit me once rather badly, precisely because of some sort of superbia on my part. I'll be honest with you, she got to the point I had ripped up. My sister was bothering me, and I was depressed. I was 14 years old or so, going through a big puberty crisis, huge. And I would sort of sit in the living room to be looked at while I was sulking and depressed, kind of an interesting thing. And I was actually studying my 8th grade, so I may have been 13 or maybe 14 towards the end of the year, or 13 rather, 8th grade, if I'm not mistaken, could have been 9th grade, religion book, a thick book. And in a fit of anger, I ripped it up. It was a big but paperback book. And my mother took off her house slipper sandal, which actually had heels on it, and with the heel hit me in the mouth, which she later, shocked, came to apologize for. So anyway, this is kind of stuff that goes on. It has a mixture of everything. And in fact, one of the great thoughts I've had for some time now as to judging myself is to use the expression, I am a mixed bag. And I remember when I got fired from one of the law firms, in fact, the last law firm before I entered the Carmelites, um, one of those dreadful Fridays, which to me are days of firing and crucifixion. You know, you get fired on a Friday. The boss, very prestigious attorney, Harvard graduated, represented the school board of Dade County, and did the Supreme Court case of all things on corporal punishment. You know, the Florida case allowed some sort of corporal punishment in the public schools. Frank Howard was the lawyer that did that. He was, well, I could tell you a lot of stories. But anyway, when I asked him, well, how was my performance nevertheless? Because I was sitting there with the three partners, you know, named partners, very, you know, good, you know, people. And he said to me, yeah, well, a mixed bag, a mixed bag. But they did say, and I have to maybe balance it with this form of bragging, um, I've never met anybody that knew more about religion than you did, so that was kind of good. It kind of steering me in that direction. A few years later, after the Carmelites, I asked him for a recommendation. He said to me, "You are. I can't recommend you. You are not temperamentally suited to be an attorney." Meaning to me, every case was personal, and I hated dishonesty or trickery, and I hated the tension of representing a client, and I could become very fierce myself in litigation. I later went to Rome, as you may know, and got my doctorate in theology and taught that for many, many years. Very, very happy, basically, for sure. So that we have this conscience. Freud talks about the superego. I was trying to remember my Freudian studies, but you have the id, that thing there that's in us that sort of has appetites and wants to suck at the breast or something. Then the ego is the intermediary, so to speak, the governor that controls how you are going to satisfy your id. What are the most effective, rational, efficient ways of satisfying your desires? Then you have a superego. I had a friend one time that thought the superego was just like an arrogant person. I was thinking of the Johnny Depp trial a little bit. But the superego is above the ego, judging as a conscience, basically, as I recall and understand it. And so we judge ourselves, and as we get older, we begin to think about. And the problem, of course, also is that as we get older, changing long-standing habits, if they're good, they're virtues, if they're bad, they're vices, or character defects. I think you can always change your vices and should. But character defects, proneness, impatience, you can try hard to do that. Francis of Sales was supposed to be very choleric man, and they say that he controlled everything so much. My Carmelite master of novices would say that when they operated on him, they found that his bile had turned to stone or something. He used to love that story, thought it was very funny. But my father was choleric and I think melancholic too, and I am that. It's a strange, temperaments type of combination. The choleric is quick, the choleric is fast, audacious, not cowardly, takes decisive action very rapidly, holds grudges. The sanguine person is, sociable and everything slides off his or her back. I think these Aristotelian categories are quite valid in many, many ways. The phlegmatic, nothing bothers him. They say Aquinas was phlegmatic, too much phlegm or whatever. These were the Greek, humors, etc. The melancholy, the black kind of guy, the dark mood guy, is cowardly, indecisive, loves beauty, tends to be deep. And so I'm a mixture of both. When I kick into action, I am incredibly decisive and intrepid. And when I am very downcast, I don't get a lot of things done, and I go into those dark places, as Mariel Hemingway's daughter, Langley, I think it is, very interestingly put it in that great program produced by Oprah Winfrey, Running from Crazy. And so we do have this notion of original sin, which we may or may not, take it literally. But I can tell you, we're all born into a world of sin and bad examples and home situations which are conducive to later, sinful actions, even evil actions. There's a cause and effect going on there that is impossible to judge for humans, really, pretty much. So that whether you believe in some sort of spiritual or physical or genetic transmission of original sin, what you observe around you is tantamount to the same thing. We are exposed to bad examples. We inherit genetic predispositions, such as to anger or to despondency or to insecurity, or we become insecure, and all these things have ramifications. Look at this Johnny Depp trial, which I've been following to some extent as primarily a human interest phenomenon, with also a legal interest, since I have a law degree. And this is a guy that apparently, had all these people have bad childhoods, quote unquote, and they have a tremendous need to be recognized in many ways. Most actors do. This is clear in Amber Heard. One of the diagnoses is histrionic personality, trying to seek attention. Maybe even they said borderline personality, which I think these are experts that skew their reports based on who's hiring them. But the point being that she too had problems, and then you have achieved tremendous success in the case of Johnny Depp, and you have all this money, and then you have all this pain that never goes away. But now you have the ability to do whatever you want with your money, and for him, it was a $30,000 a month wine habit, plus drugs and many other things. And then, of course, anger and beating. I don't know whether he beat her ever, but I believe that domestic abuse, which apparently I heard the court has not defined, or maybe will not define for the jury, domestic violence or domestic abuse. It's going to be up to the jury to decide. I think, horrible verbal attacks and throwing bottles in your direction, as Ellen Barkin said he did, not at her, nor did he hit her with the bottle. And some of these bottles were Magnum wine bottles. In her direction, that to me is abusive. If that's on a day-to-day basis and you're a drinking and drugging person, let's see what the jury's going to say. But my point being that cause and effect, when with our upbringing, and then some people can be heroic in what they overcome, and others, most of us, much less heroic. So that we have to deal with what we're made of. I wanted to read a couple of passages on conscience or judgment. In 1 Corinthians 4:3, I hope that's right. Yes, let our brothers and sisters or fellow human beings consider us servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. What is, at the end of the day, required of a steward is that they be faithful, although, as regards myself, what is least important to me is to be judged by you or by a human court or tribunal. I don't even judge myself. Certainly, my conscience does not reproach me, but not because of that am I justified. My judge is the Lord. Therefore, judge nothing before its time until the coming of the Lord. He will illuminate the secrets of the darkness and make manifest the designs of the hearts. And then everyone will receive from the Lord the praise that corresponds to him. By the way, this reminds me of when I did my Markan studies, just so that I don't forget, a little bit of a digression, but when I did my Markan studies for my dissertation and my doctorate, what I read that struck me most about the famous eschatological discourse in Mark 13, which would be where a final judgment would be put. What I read was that, unlike Matthew 25, for example, which I want to talk about right now before I forget again, where there is a final judgment really described, and we should take that one seriously. But in Mark, what will happen after false prophets and all kinds of, portents, and the gospel must be preached everywhere and you'll be persecuted, blah, blah, blah. In those days, there will be a great tribulation, etc. The sun will be darkened, the moon will lose its splendor, the stars will be falling from the skies, and the powers that are in the heavens shall be shaken. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming among the clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send his angels and gather from the four winds his elect, from one extreme of the earth to the other extreme of heaven. And what I remember from that commentary was that that's not a final judgment. That is a final ingathering of the Lord, of his elect. So that, I suppose that's a qualifier there. Um, the other passage I wanted to mention is in John, where, unlike the synoptics, famously, the fourth gospel is often spoken of as having a realized eschatology. It means that you don't have to really wait till some end of time event when Jesus comes on clouds. The Son of Man, who is Jesus, at least in the Gospels. You don't have to wait for that eschatology, the study of the last things. It's realized, it's already taken place, and this is found in a very heavy, interesting chapter, chapter 5, which, by the way, is the chapter that begins with the healing of this paralytic who has been lying next to the pool with the healing waters for 38 years, an inordinately long period of time. And he says, well, when they move the waters, I have no one to help me get in the pool for 38 years. And when I was studying, Deuteronomy, I saw that the length of time that Israel went around and around the mountain, wasting time after they had basically arrived at the promised land to conquer it. was 38 years. Deuteronomy 2:14. 38 years is an important period in some of these texts. I think in Qumran you have a 38-year. Uh, I know you do. So that this man represents a fearful, sort of slothful individual. The first thing Jesus asks him is, "Do you want to be healed?" And he gives his lame excuse. And then later, when Jesus sees him, he says, "Look, you've been healed. Sin no more, lest something worse happen to you." So this man is one of these guys that his sin and malady are related. But as Jesus then continues, and there's a controversy because he has manifested himself as considering himself to be equal to God, Jesus begins to speak, and I'm not going to get into anything, all the text here, but the Father judges no one, says Jesus, but all judgment he has given to the Son, so that they all honor the Son as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Amen, amen, I say to you, the one who hears my word and believes in the one who sent me has eternal life and does not enter into judgment, but has passed from death to life. Now, it's got to be symbolic in some way, metaphorical, because to pass from death to life can't be literally dropping dead and rising from the dead. It's got to be passing from being in a state of death, maybe a very dark state, criminal, sinful, despondent, whatever, into this life that Jesus says in this gospel, "I have come that you may have life and have it in abundance," which we sometimes wish this were more palpable, and some of this wish fulfillment or fulfillment of this wish depends on our efforts too. So that I truly, truly, I tell you, the hour is coming and it's already here when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear it shall live, just like he yelled and Lazarus heard him in the tomb a few chapters later. Because as the Father has life in himself, so also has he given the Son to have life in himself. And he has given him exousia, or power, authority, a dominion, authority, the ability to act without any impediment whatsoever, legal, moral, physical, whatever, to judge, because he is the Son of Man. So this text here, very mysterious, because Son of Man is not I don't think it's a big Gospel of John term. This is back to Daniel 7, Son of Man has power over all nations, etc. And so you now have in Christianity the figure of Jesus as judge, which in this Gospel of John, it's a double trial, just like Johnny Depp. Suit, countersuit. Johnny sues, Amber defends, then Amber files a cross complaint or a countersuit or whatever term they use in the various jurisdictions, and if Johnny wants 50 million, she wants 100. Well, here in this gospel, Jesus is being sued by the religious authorities, and then he's going to countersue and say that you will be judged, etc. And when the the Paraclete comes, he will convict, etc. And so you have this idea that in a way we are being judged right now. It could be sort of a process, or it could be our fundamental options, etc., as they used to say. By the way, I did look this up. I have a website that you can find called, if you Google Chavez or Emilio Chavez Bible Explainer Bible, you'll find my website. It'll say not secure because I haven't paid the money required to make, but I don't have any viruses, or I wouldn't know how to do it. But anyway, in Spanish, I have about a 40-page document that I wrote in 1992 with the Descalced Carmelites. The same month, basically May, 30 years ago, a little bit more because I arrived in the Dominican the 25th of May, the Feast of Santa Maria Maddalena dei Pazzi. And it's called The Christian Faith. And I talk about in section 12, what is salvation? What is the destiny of human life? A philosophical, theological reflection. Salvation is to, in the last instance, to be definitively with God, to see him face to face, and therefore be like unto him. This salvation is ours by the grace of God if we do not reject or frustrate it, which always involves guilt. God rejects no one. It is the human being who is free to reject him directly or indirectly. To live as a friend of God, basically living in accordance with his divine plan as our own conscience indicates, and fulfills the requisites of the without even without being conscious of this, is already appropriating the salvation worked by Christ and fulfills implicitly, I'm alluding to Karl Rahner, the requirements of the church: faith, baptism, sacraments, and being sorry for sin. So even 30 years ago, I was saying that if you follow your conscience and try to live like a friend of God, even if you're not aware that's what you're doing, and you're living basically in accordance with the divine plan, you have appropriated the salvation Christ has worked. And this even is an implicit fulfillment of the commandments of the church. Salvation shall only be accomplished or fulfilled with our death, when our options will have ended. Option to choosing life or choosing death, choosing God or not choosing him, or against God, implicitly or explicitly. And so I don't know that I want to get more into this thing that I wrote a long time ago and have not looked at in a long time. But there you have some elements of theology, etc. And now let's get to the final judgment in Matthew, which is the Son of Man coming in his glory, accompanied by his angels, etc., and he will sit on his throne of glory. Now, this is the same as in the first book of Enoch. The citation would be 62:5. And I think this is an argument. The other day I said that the parables of Enoch, which talk about the Son of Man, Enoch is composed of 5 books, that not all of it talks about the Son of Man. But there's this composite Redeemer figure, chosen one of Isaiah, Messiah, and Son of Man of Daniel into a composite Redeemer figure who doesn't suffer, by the way. The reason it may not be in Qumran is because it may be too late. This section of the book of Enoch, first book of Enoch, may be too late to have made it to Qumran, which disappeared under the Romans in 68, CE, AD. But it's found in Matthew, which is not much later than that. So there's a little mystery there. But of course, as you know, the final judgment in Matthew is not on what you blabbed, because Matthew is all about deeds, not words, not saying Lord, Lord, or we work miracles and I never knew you, says the Lord when he comes. It's not about blabbing, it's about being righteous, beginning with the righteous Joseph and the blood of the righteous from Abel to Zechariah, who was killed in Matthew 23. It's also in Luke. That's a Q saying, meaning it's goes back to Jesus, I think. Well, what are the criteria for the final judgment? I was hungry, you gave me to eat. I was naked, you clothed me. I was in prison, you visited me. I was sick, you came and visited me, etc. We didn't know it was you, blah, 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 blah. Well, whenever you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me. So I would say that very important in our conscience and the judgment, the final judgment. Here's the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo depiction of the final judgment. It really has to do with something very basic, which is what the Jews call tikkun olam, to heal the world, meaning to help create a good society where, as Paul says regarding the body, the weaker members are more honored. With one part hurts, the whole body hurts. Your little toe, you could get gangrene on your little toe, and you could, if not treated, you could die. And we have situations in the world today which are ignored or insufficiently attended to, and which are jeopardize our whole existence and just the social fabric and relations with people. That's why when you have a president that insults and laughs at the handicapped and incites to hatred and violence, that's the worst thing you can have. So I didn't want to talk too long, and all of a sudden I have 38 minutes that have passed, and I wanted to talk specifically about a specific case that I find fascinating. It'll draw a smile, I hope, or maybe some other worse kind of ridicule. But another series that I have watched many, many times, or another program that I have watched many, many times, is Nothing Left Unsaid, which is about Gloria Vanderbilt, produced by her son Anderson Cooper, who seems to me to be a very nice guy. And he's married to a man and has adopted children. And Gloria, he says, was like a being from another planet who suddenly finds herself here and has to make a life for herself. Gloria is from, the Vanderbilt family, these Dutch people like the Roosevelts, not all of them, but enough of them that tell me that genes, and I don't, I did think about this last night, genes not in the sense of Gloria Vanderbilt's genes, but genetics. This is something like royal genes. Theodore Roosevelt, even Franklin Roosevelt, not considered quite as brilliant, even though Theodore made his mistakes for sure. But these were big people that made a lot of money and then said, we really need to be helping others, even at self-sacrifice. And so you have Gloria Vanderbilt born. Her father, I think, was a drunken guy and a gambler or something. Her mother was twins with her sister, identical. Their mother was from Chile, a very conniving kind of woman. And so this poor little rich girl, Gloria Vanderbilt, was all in the papers because they were fighting about the inheritance and whether her mother had committed abominations by having lesbian affairs, etc. And the mother was not a very caring woman, really. Gloria stopped talking to her and wouldn't help her. The mother went hysterically blind, meaning, I think in Freudian terms, conversion hysteria. A psychological condition is translated into a bodily condition. You might call it psychosomatic, but blindness is serious. But not only that, in the midst of all this litigation, steps in this Whitney, her aunt. I forget her first name. Great artist. These are all big people with incredible talent, intelligence, meticulousness, all this stuff. And I admire those kinds of people. I'm reading about Tolstoy now, nuts in many ways and crazy in many ways, but they have, they talk about original sin. They were transmitted some sort of incredible prowess, intelligence, intuitions, who knows? And also the environment that they grew up in and all that. So anyway, the the nanny, who was really Gloria's mother, um, Dodo, this big German-Irish woman, but really Irish, says Gloria. I read her books too. Was her mother, and Gloria just ignored her after a while. The letters are pathetic. And all this stuff is shown in this program. I think it's a CNN program. Nothing left unsaid. So Gloria was this, bounced around, manipulated little girl. Then all of a sudden she's 17. She's been to some sort of finishing school or something. Beautiful girl. Goes to Hollywood and starts partying her brains out. And her aunt says people are talking about you. She goes and marries a kind of a wife beater, loser, Italian American guy. Then she marries Stokowski, a guy 63 years older, I think, or 60 years old. And Gloria was 20, he was 63, 43 years old or something like that. And then she marries Sidney Lumet, a real mensch from the Yiddish theater, great director, The Dog Day Afternoon, many others. And he would write her, why don't you love me? I love you. That didn't work. And then she finally married Wyatt Cooper, a real good Southern boy, screenwriter, successful, and she had Anderson with him. I think she also had the older son. I think he was the older son for sure. Not the first, not the oldest with Stokowski, the conductor, Polish conductor, but a son between him and Anderson who jumped from that building in New York where she lived. Which, by the way, trivia, she sold the building to a woman named Stein, who also jumped from the same apartment. I mean, I don't know what was going on there, but I read the biography of Edie Sedgwick, and Jean Stein, I think, is the author, and she died in like at the age of 80 something or maybe 90 by jumping off the same window that Gloria Vanderbilt's son had jumped before. So Gloria in this program is going through all the kinds of things in her life and all the bad and all her coldness with Dodo, even with her mother. The mother finally comes to visit, and the oldest boy, the Stokowski boy, very nice, young, not so young, and he's probably older than me now. He says, I knew it was a big deal that my grandmother was coming to visit after so many years, maybe more than 30 years of no contact with her millionaire daughter. And it was all a very banal exchange of pleasantries, cold, short, and the mother, of course, was sightless. So one of the scenes that I really love in this, there's a few of them. One is that Gloria says, and she looks great when her expression. She's a great artist. Gloria Vanderbilt was a great painter. In my opinion, I love the way she painted her colors. But she says, there was always a diamond inside of me, a hard thing that couldn't be broken. I had to develop that to deal with my childhood and everything that came with it. And you couldn't crack it, and you couldn't even get at it. And she says, and I always knew that. And she turns her face away I fell in love with her and she was like 90 years old. And then as they're talking and Anderson is her boy really, that takes care of her, looks after her, very simple but very top-notch stuff. She says, I have failed so many times. You can tell that is what is known in Catholic theology, compunction. You're sort of really, actually the Apostles has a similar expression when Peter preached on the first Christian Pentecost, if you will. They were pierced to the heart, circumcision of the heart. So I think Gloria, and I've read her books, like I said, not religious, not a believer person, went through life doing what her lights or lack thereof suggested, and she had the ability to do, and lives to be 93, 94, I think, before she died. So a long life like that to me is a sign of having done things right. And she does say at one point, I'm still here, which is an achievement in a life like that. But the repentance, the summing up her life and stating explicitly, I have failed. She doesn't say sinned. I have failed so many times, is, I think, something that is quite tantamount to what I was thinking even 30 years ago, that I don't think God can be more generous or tolerant than we are. It's a complicated subject theologically because of the scriptural texts. But I suppose there are a lot of, that's what I studied, the Bible basically. There's a lot of stuff that you need to interpret there. I'm plugging again the Jewish Study Bible, especially the one I'm reading, which is the second edition. How up to date everything is, and the Jewish freedom to be rational without being a slave to the letter or to literalism. I know there are some Jews that are very literalist, and they tie phylacteries, etc. That's maybe fine. I've seen some great movies in some ways. But the idea is that, and in fact, in the Bible, and I took an eschatology course in Madrid in the major seminary, judgment is something you want. It's not a negative thing. I'm going before the judge and I'm guilty and I'm scared, blankless. Judicame Deus, e discerne causa mea de gente non sancta. Judge me, O God, and defend my cause from unholy people. You want the judge to judge if you are clamoring for justice, for a judgment in your favor. That widow who went to the corrupt judge, and by dint of repetition and bothering him so much, she finally got what she wanted. So I didn't expect this to go to this point. I'm almost done. But certainly, I think that our impulse ideally should be like Job. I know that my Redeemer lives. That's an incredibly difficult text to disentangle and restore, whatever. But from the dust I will rise, or he will rise, or something. And I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he at last, or the last, will rise over the dust, or something. He will pronounce his vindication on the dust or on the earth. It's very, very murky. You can have a beautiful translation, and it's very clear, but it may not be the Hebrew of this text. Yearning for God and yearning for his righteousness, which we lack. Not having a righteousness of my own, but that which is from the faith of Christ, if I recall. Of Christ, not in Christ necessarily, but of Christ. Christ had faith even when he was on the cross, abandoned and mocked. And, he felt abandoned by his own father. So that's really what I could share. I judge myself as a mixed bag. But I'll tell you one last story that I did think about. I came back from Mexico. I was teaching ESOL, English to speakers of other languages, and they called me one day to substitute the last minute, and I sped on Dixie Highway in Miami, and a policeman stopped me. I get out of the car. I'm very respectful to the police. I don't try to antagonize them or disturb them in any way. And he goes, "You were speeding." And I go, "I'm sorry, officer. I'm a teacher. I got called to teach at the last minute and I was going too fast, etc. Didn't pay attention." He goes, "Well, you're a teacher. I'm a cop. You teach. I give tickets. If you say the right thing, I'll let you go. If you say the wrong thing, I'll give you a ticket. Let me ask you, do you deserve a ticket?" I said, "Officer, if there were no mercy, I deserve a ticket." And he said, "You said the right thing. I am letting you go.